Muy buenas tardes. Good afternoon. This is Chavez and Barco, Facebook Live. Today we have a wonderful Facebook Live. We want to talk about DACA and also Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo, it's a very special party for us, for the Mexican people. So I introduce you, Jennifer Villani Burton, our attorney, and the greatest Nick Chavez. Nick, please talk to us.
Well, happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. Is it a real holiday? I think you're going to talk to us about that, Alfonso. But, I always say if they serve tequila, that means it's a true holiday and you got to celebrate it. I don't know if you want to say something about give us a little history lesson, Alfonso, about Cinco de Mayo.
I'm going to say this in Spanish. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Cinco de Mayo. Esta es una fecha memorable para nuestro país, porque ese 5 de mayo de 1862, estamos hablando de hace casi 2 siglos, México y su ejército por primera vez venció a un país que lo invadió, que era Francia, uno de los países más poderosos, cuyo gobernante era Napoleón III. Así que esto se origina por una deuda que México tenía con este país y con otros dos, que eran Inglaterra y España. Le debíamos $90 millones de aquellos, imagínense cuánto era.
Wow.
Pero el país en ese momento venía saliendo de muchos problemas. Es más, no terminaba. La independencia de México fueron muchos años. Eso desgastó al país y no tenía capacidad de pago. Así que Francia, pensando en expandirse su imperio, no quiso colaborar con México. Sí lo hicieron España e Inglaterra. Se retiran, ellos deciden no invadir por esa deuda, pero Francia sí dice, yo voy para México, y la idea que tenían según los historiadores no era solamente cobrar la deuda, sino hacerse de más materias primas de parte de México. Y también tenían la intención de que Estados Unidos, que en ese momento salía de la guerra civil, no quería que se expandiera hacia el sur de su propio país, es decir, deteniendo a los Estados Unidos. Así que ellos sí deciden invadir México, pero son detenidos por un general mexicano, Zaragoza, allí en ese lugar que se llama Puebla. Por cierto, Puebla ahora tiene el nombre de Puebla de Zaragoza, en honor a este gran capitán mexicano, general, perdóneme. Así que esto es lo que sucede en la realidad, y México vence a los franceses. Bueno, decirlo que fue una batalla muy grande, muy buena. Finalmente retroceden los franceses hacia Veracruz, que era donde se inició el ataque, y se rearman y después llegan a México, y vencen precisamente al ejército mexicano. Y en ese momento, el presidente Benito Juárez decide abandonar la capital y se lleva su gobierno a otros estados de la República. Y precisamente, y aquí va un dato muy interesante para Nick, porque sé que Nick y sus familiares vivían del otro lado de Ciudad Juárez, en El Paso. El último lugar donde Benito Juárez tiene su gobierno provisional es precisamente El Paso, que así se llamaba de este lado. Y esa ciudad, que es Ciudad Juárez, recibe el nombre de Juárez, Ciudad Juárez, precisamente porque es a donde el presidente Benito Juárez tuvo su último gobierno antes de recuperar nuestro país para los mexicanos. Y esta es la historia así rápida de lo que es el 5 de mayo, una fiesta que se celebra en todo Estados Unidos. Pero ¿saben por qué se celebra tanto como si fuera lo más importante? Porque tuvimos el apoyo de Estados Unidos en esta empresa. Estados Unidos venía saliendo de su guerra civil y le interesaba luchar por intereses democráticos y de libertad. Así que tuvimos el apoyo de Estados Unidos al presidente Juárez, y es por eso que se celebra tanto en Estados Unidos como en México. Y esta es la verdad. Estados Unidos y México desde este tiempo ya tenían antecedentes de buenas relaciones. Esperemos que sigan de esa manera. Y esta es la historia del 5 de mayo.
Wow.
Espero que haya sido muy bien, que les haya agradado, que les haya gustado.
Sí.
Excelente.
Sí, bueno, Alfonso, sabemos que no es el día de la independencia, ¿verdad? Pero es una razón para celebrar, para sonreír y divertirse, ¿verdad? Y realmente es otra razón para celebrar una hermosa cultura y mostrar orgullo, ¿verdad? Especialmente Se celebra aquí en algunas comunidades latinas en los Estados Unidos, Los Ángeles siendo un gran ejemplo.
Bueno, también Chicago, yo estuve celebrando esto en Chicago, lo celebré también en Los Ángeles, lo he celebrado aquí, y en todas las grandes ciudades de Estados Unidos se celebra. Es más, el día de hoy lo celebramos aquí en nuestra oficina. Tuvimos el gusto de recibir un almuerzo mexicano y comimos comida mexicana y dulces mexicanos, y por ahí nuestro amigo Joe podría ponernos alguna foto de lo que fue esta celebración. Miren, ahí está Nick, bendito entre las mujeres. Puras mujeres allá en la visita en Forward. A ver si tenemos otra por ahí. Vean, todos estamos muy orgullosos de ser mexicanos, de ser mexicoamericanos y de estar aquí en este país trabajando para Chávez y Balco, la oficina de inmigración. Ahí está toda nuestra gente. Allá está Mr. Balco con el zarape de Saltillo a la derecha. A la derecha están todos nuestros abogados, nuestras compañeras. Por ahí van a aparecer de Three Amigos. Van a ver una foto. Three Amigas. Y luego viene Three Amigos, ahí está Eduardo, está Rodrigo y está nuestro abogado Omar. Así que vean ustedes qué orgullosos estamos de celebrar el 5 de mayo aquí en Dallas, Texas, para todos nuestros amigos y nuestro público en general. Esto es el 5 de mayo y la batalla en la que el detalle más importante es cuando vence el ejército mexicano al extranjero, le reportan al presidente, le dicen para decirle que ganaron la batalla, y dicen, las armas de México se han cubierto de gloria este día. Así es como informaron acerca de la victoria. Y bien, con esto terminamos el 5 de mayo y vamos a platicar sobre el DACA. Why we are going to talk, today is a special day. We are going to talk in English and also in Spanish, of course, but mainly in English. In English because our tema is DACA, and 90% approximately of these DACA recipients are Mexicans. See, so that's why we are going to talk in English, because these people, these people, they feel more comfortable speaking in English. So that's why we are going to talk in English. About 65,000 people are in DACA program. 81% are born in Mexico. Almost of these live in California and in Texas. And estimated there are 29,000 people working are they health workers, and they are 26 years old on average, and they pay approximately 1.7 billion in taxes here in USA. So this is why they are very important. They are doing a great effort and in this country. That's why we are going to have this program in English for them. So we have many questions right now. And now Jennifer and Nick Chavez, our attorneys, are going to give the answers for this. Please, Joe, you have a question? Please put it in our... Okay, DACA eligibility.
Just like how Alfonso said, we're going to be primarily speaking in English, but if you have a question, si tienen alguna pregunta en español, por favor, preséntela en la pantalla. We're going to be primarily speaking in English and going over some of the DACA requirements, some of the things that we see as attorneys, some of the problem areas, and offer some good tips. If you're thinking about applying for DACA, if you're not too sure if you're eligible for DACA, we're going to be covering some of those basic grounds. And of course, if you want to speak more specifically about your case, or you have a specific question, please feel free to send us a message. We'll be happy to respond. Well, so the DACA requirements are they're in different groups. First, you have the age requirements, and you have to be at least 15 years of age to apply for DACA. Now, there's an exception. I hardly ever see this exception apply, but this is an exception for those who are currently in removal proceedings. But in general, you have to be 15 or over to apply. And we get this question a lot, do we, Jennifer? We have individuals who want to apply for DACA, but they're not there just yet, right? They're in middle school, maybe elementary. Right. But according to the requirements, you must be at least 15. Another important requirement, and I think this is the essential requirement for DACA, is to show that you entered the United States while you were under 16 years of age. We sometimes get people in our office who they meet all the requirements. We're really happy. Oh, they got their GED or they got their high school diploma. They've been living here since 2007, and it looks like they're going to meet the requirements. But then it turns out they came in when they were 16 or they were 17 or 18. And unfortunately, that disqualifies them from applying for DACA. So you must show that you have entered the United States while you were under 16. Now, one of the things that we get from time to time, and I'm sure you get this a lot, Jennifer, is we get a person who came in as a tourist, and they came in the United States while they were under 16. But it could have been that they were here on vacation and they left back and they stayed in Mexico for over 6 months. And it wasn't until they turned 17 that they entered the United States and actually stayed and went to school. In those cases, unfortunately, immigration is requiring that individuals who entered while they were under 16 also show that they were established. So you have to show that there were some ties, that you just simply did not touch the soil here and then just return, that you were established to meet that the under 16 requirement. So very important, very key there. You also have to show that you were physically present in the United States on June 15, 2012. Why June? Why this specific day? Well, that's the date on which DACA was announced. So when DACA was announced, they're saying from this point forward, individuals who are currently here, if you meet certain requirements, you're allowed to apply for DACA. Another issue that creeps up is we have individuals who were here, they meet the requirements, but when they were here, when DACA was announced in 2012, they had status. They were here on their tourist visa, for example, or they had their student visa. They were on the student visa going to school. Are they eligible? And that's the question. Unfortunately, there's a requirement there for DACA that you have to show that on June 15, 2012, when DACA was announced, that you also did not have legal status. So if you were here on a tourist visa, if you were within your 6 months period of time, unfortunately, you are not eligible for DACA. Then we have the educational requirements here. You have to show that you graduated from high school, or that you have your GED, or that you were in military service, or if you don't have your diploma or a GED, you can show them that you're currently in school. And I think this is the most common type, where people are currently going to school, they're currently going to high school, and they would satisfy their requirement. Now, if you're not currently in school, well, if you dropped out of high school, which is also common, and never obtained your GED, you can still satisfy this requirement by showing that you are currently enrolled in a GED program, and not just any GED program will do. I mean, it has to be one that has a good reputation, that's well established. When DACA first came out, there was a lot of scams going on. So if you're going to pick a GED program, my recommendation is to make sure that's offered by community college, because they're tied in with government funds, or a school district. And some school districts do offer that. So just make sure you look into that, and that it's just not any. If you feel like it's like this place that's offering a GED, if you feel like it might not measure up, do your homework, check them out, see if they're established and all that. And then also the criminal violations, that could also disqualify you. We'll talk a little bit further about that. Just to qualify for DACA, you have to show that you have not been convicted of a felony or significant misdemeanor. They have a list of criminal offenses that qualify as a significant misdemeanor, such as DWI, distribution of drugs, etc., or 3 or more misdemeanors. So that could also disqualify you. Now, if you're renewing, the process is straightforward. Even if your DACA has expired, you can still file it. It's a straightforward process. You don't have to submit that much paperwork unless you've been arrested. And at that point, you have to get some documents, a police record or a court record. And I highly recommend that you speak to a lawyer to make sure that you still are eligible for DACA. If your DACA has expired for longer than a year, then you must essentially do it over, meaning it's not treated as a renewal in terms of what you put in. You have to file DACA as if you were filing it for the first time, which means you have to submit all that paperwork showing that you went to school or that you're currently in school, residence information and documentation, all that. So if your DACA is expiring or has expired, make sure you file it before it turns 1 year after it expired.
Oh, wonderful. So it was very, very interesting what you were telling us about the eligibility for DACA. But now you started talking about documents, but I want to ask you, Jennifer,
Sure.
what documents we need or they need to get this DACA? What kind of documents? And if you have any suggestions, especially for them?
Yes, that's a great question. Well, we need to show the documents that are going to fit into those categories that were just mentioned, right? So we're going to need to show your age eligibility. That's typically going to be your birth certificate, if you have a passport, to prove you're in that age. And I did just want to add for that age too, another area where we have a lot of questions is for the older DACA clients, we just have to show you were under 31 when this announcement was made way back in 2012. So sometimes there are people that are now over 31 who think they don't qualify, but they actually do, because at that time they were at the proper age. So we need to show your age, documents showing your age, education requirement. If you have your high school diploma, if you have your GED, copy of that, easy. If you're currently enrolled in a program, they are a little stricter on that. So we'd want to see if you're attending high school, your most recent grades, a letter of enrollment from the school. If you're in a GED program, they can be a little stricter on that. So we would typically want proof of enrollment, proof you paid for that program if there are costs, copy of your schedule, any materials you have, just more we have, the better. And we want to actually show you're in that program. So we don't want to be filing your DACA that you're starting this program in August. We want to show you're in that now or wait till you're meeting that requirement. Probably the one where people have the most difficulty is showing arriving before age 16 or proving their continuous physical presence from 2007 on. For arriving prior to 16, when people arrive when they're very young, shot records is usually the best, and also school records. So if you don't have those, you can get those from the school district or the health department, or a lot of times I always say, go ask your mom, go ask your parents. They kind of keep everything. I would say where that's more difficult is a lot of times, usually it's men, but sometimes it's women as well that get here when they're 15 and just start working. Sometimes we have clients that start working for cash, or sometimes I have clients that are caring for younger siblings, something like that. That's going to be tougher to try to prove that. So we want to try to be creative. Are there letters from people that know you were living here? Were you on your parents' taxes? Were you on a lease? Did they take you to the doctor? Anything like that. And then for continuous physical presence, we're looking for any document with a name and a date that the government can tell is here in the United States. So again, school records are a really easy one, medical records, taxes, paycheck stubs, children's birth certificates, marriage certificates, being a little more creative. Sometimes we've used social media posts from people or proof of delivery from different things. Really anything with your name and a date, we'll try to work with it.
So there are a lot of papers that they can present in order to prove that they have evidence, document evidence for this program. I like mathematics. In other words, if these people have to prove that they were at least 31 years when in 2012, So nearly, we are talking about people who are already can be 40 years old. Is that correct?
Well, so I don't like math. I don't want to do that on the top of my head, but yeah, we have a program that we use all the time. You can just find one online too. That's a age calculator. So we'll put in their exact birthday and that exact date and see their age. But yes, you're right. They could potentially, since that's now almost 9 years ago, we do have people that are over that age that are still going to qualify. We always want to check that. And I think that's a good thing to check for getting here before 16 too, because sometimes people get confused and it's like they're right there. So it's always a good idea to check that out.
I did this question because thinking in people who are thinking that they are too old, but not too old in some way. If they are almost 40, if they can prove this, they can qualify.
Yes, so, and that's a great point, because I think a lot of people think, oh, DACA is 15, 16-year-olds. No, not necessarily. A lot of them are parents, professionals.
Yeah, but there is an age. There is an age requirement that, and the way to show it, the easy way to know it is go by the date. So when DACA came out, they said if you were over 30 years of age, you couldn't apply for DACA at that point. So we use the date of birth, meaning anyone who was born after June 15th, 2000, or now I'm forgetting. See how confusing this is? June 15th, 1981. If you were born after that date or on or after that date, then you would be eligible for DACA. You're not capped in that sense. You're not disqualified because of your age. If you were born before that, then you're not going to be eligible for DACA.
Good. So what about the crimes absence in something that disqualify these people? Can you talk, Nick, about this?
Yeah, we just talked. One of the disqualifications we just touched on is the age. That's actually one of the more common ones that we get from our clients who ask if they're eligible. For the most part, I think that they know, they're aware. They just want to double check, and you have to show that you entered under 16 years of age, that you were born after June 15th, 1981. Those type of age requirements are important. But I think the second most common disqualification that we see is crime. And so at the beginning, I laid out that there are certain disqualifications. One being if you've been convicted of a felony. So if you pleaded guilty, a judge handed you a sentence, whether it be probation or jail for a felony, then you're disqualified. And then USCIS lists out certain offenses that if you are convicted of these offenses, then you're disqualified. And they call them significant misdemeanors. Okay, and one of the more common ones is DWI. So driving under the influence or driving while intoxicated. If you are convicted of that offense, you are not eligible for DACA. Now, another one is drug distribution. And I want to distinguish the drug distribution with drug possession because they're completely different. So drug possession, for example, possession of marijuana, will that disqualify you from DACA? Not necessarily, but if you were dealing and if you were caught selling and you were charged and convicted of that, then that could disqualify you. Domestic violence is another disqualifier. If you were convicted of an assault and it indicates that this was related to domestic violence, then you might not be eligible for DACA. There is a slight exception for individuals who were arrested and convicted of assault, family-related assault. And that's if you were somehow defending yourself. If there's this history of abuse, and this time the police got it wrong and they arrested you and they charged you. It could be that your attorney said, plead, it's just easier. Well, they give us an opportunity to show that you should not be disqualified because you were acting in self-defense. So that is good. The other disqualifier is burglary and firearm offenses. and any misdemeanor in which you were sentenced to 90 days or longer. Those are the types of criminal activities that could disqualify you from DACA. The other, you don't need a disqualification. Or I should say before that, it's if you're convicted of 3 or more misdemeanors, then you're also, in addition to a felony, in addition to significant misdemeanors, 3 or more misdemeanors, and I'm not talking minor, here in Texas, Class C traffic tickets, although you still need to check with your attorney, but misdemeanors, 3 or more will disqualify you. Now, I used the word conviction, convicted. Well, that's important. That's important language, because if you were just arrested and it turned out that they dropped the charges, or it turned out that the prosecutor decided to give you something else, or there's this deal here in Texas where we deal, where we have a lot of these types of programs called pretrial diversion, which means that you're not pleading guilty to a judge, and a judge is not handing you a sentence. You're just making an agreement with the prosecutor that, look, I'm going to take your course. I'm going to go to anger management or whatever, and I will complete it. And if I complete this, the prosecutor in exchange will drop the charges, so you'll never go to court. And so those things are not convictions. But if you have been arrested, my advice is always go with the lawyer, so you can get a good advice on whether or not this is going to affect you or not. The other thing, this doesn't involve the conviction, it's that the immigration just thinks that based on your history, that you are a threat to society. And this happens when they think that people or certain applicants used to belong to certain gangs. And so that if you have been arrested for anything, I think we need to look at the police report and see if there was any notes there taken about gang membership, because that could influence the decision of the USCIS officer. Crime aside, other things that we've seen that disqualify a person are long absences. So if, we talked about, Jennifer talked about continuous residence. You have to show evidence of continuous residence, right? That you lived here. If you lived for a long period of time from June 2007 to the present, if you were outside the country, well, I should say from June 15, 2007 to June 15, 2012, that 5-year period, if you've been outside the country for a long period of time, that could disqualify you. There's an exception for those who were out, and they use a standard called brief, casual, or innocent. So if you were out for maybe 2 weeks to visit and then you came back in, that shouldn't affect you. However, absences after June 15th, 2012, any absence that's not authorized by immigration will affect you. And this includes if you were picked up by ICE or if you were deported, that could disqualify you after that date, I should say. And the other thing, even if you meet the requirements for DACA, immigration doesn't have to give you the benefit. Immigration does not have to give you DACA, even though you might meet the requirements. And this is a thing called discretion. So based on your history, based on, it could be that you didn't pay 10 tickets or something like that, right? Or there's another factor. They could say, you don't deserve it. And it's rarely, we rarely see these types of decisions, but it's important to know that they will always have the authority to deny it based on this broad power that they have.
Good tips, Nick. We have to talk about every time about this because they are very important tips. But now we are going to talk about the process. What is this like, Jennifer? Sure. I believe that people are afraid of the process because they don't know where this starts, where is the way, and how they finish this process. Can you talk about this in a few words, please?
Absolutely. So for DACA initial, once you file your application, you're going to get a receipt. That's typically, I would say pre-pandemic was about 3 to 4 weeks. That can take a bit longer now. then normally you will have a biometric appointment where you will go to USCIS office with an ID and have your fingerprints taken. They do that for everyone. Right now, with DACA initials, we have not been getting those yet due to the pandemic. And that's going on in many different types of cases. So if that's your situation, don't worry. That's why that is going on. And then you wait for a decision or further correspondence from the government. So if they need anything else, they're going to send you what's known as a request for evidence. If you have an attorney or a legal representative, they're going to send that to them as well. And you're going to have a chance to respond. So if they need further information about your school, they need more proof you were living here, you're then going to have that opportunity to respond. And then you would receive a decision. Right now, we're seeing initial DACA applications take up to 9 months, is what the government has published on their website, which they do update. For renewals, it's a simpler process. You're not having to submit all of that evidence again and again every time. You would get a receipt, and then typically you would get your biometric fingerprint appointment. Right now, they are waiving those for renewals. So what does that mean? If you're doing a DACA renewal, you most likely will not get a fingerprint appointment. And that's just because, many of the DACA applicants, they've now been taking your fingerprints for many times. They can check up on you. We have been getting those decisions quicker, some as fast as a month and a half to a couple months. So that's basically the process for both of them. It can be intimidating. There's a lot of incorrect information out there, but if you think you qualify, you should absolutely talk to someone. You don't have to go to an interview. You're not putting other family members at risk. I know that's a lot of people's question, right? If people are in these mixed households that, hey, I can apply for DACA, but my parents don't have status, or sibling or someone else is living here, they should only be looking at the person applying for the benefit. So we would definitely encourage you to speak to someone and to apply if you think you might qualify.
And we can help them. We can help these people if they have any questions about traveling. Nick, is there any advantage, and what are the requirements? I know that people with DACA, they have been here for 10, 15, 20, 25 years living in USA, not going to their country. Is there any advantage if they want to go and travel to the country, Mexico especially? Specifically?
Well, to travel for DACA, it's something that first you must have DACA. You must have your DACA status before you can apply. They're allowing travel at this moment. In other words, you can file the application right now, and they'll accept it and they'll process it. But not everyone is going to get travel. They are going to limit the travel permit, which is also called is called advanced parole. And I always freak out when I hear parole, because I think about the crime, right? I think about the criminal process and probation and / parole, all that stuff. But this is actually advanced parole in the immigration context is a good thing. And to apply for advanced parole or travel, you have to show a humanitarian reason. You have to show that you have to justify why you're traveling. So not everyone, if you want to go to Cancun, if you want to go on vacation, then they're not going to give it to you. You have to specify a reason. It could be medical. It could be related to work. We have situations where employers need their employees to go to another country for a conference or for an important meeting. It could be educational as well. This could be where you're going to school, and they might have, right now, particularly hard because of COVID, but in the future, they could have something where you study abroad, right? That could qualify. Also, missionary work. We have had clients who were part of worship centers, and they were part of missionary groups in their church where they needed to, where they wanted to go out and help build roads in Mexico, for example. And with a letter from a pastor, we were able to get advanced parole for this particular client. But it's not automatic, and that's my point. And it could take a while too, right? Jennifer, how long is this taking?
Yes, we have seen that taking several months. I think, again, that's kind of going back to the pandemic and the fingerprints and everything like that. But it does take some time. So yes, if you have an emergency situation, you have a family member pass away, you need to leave for a funeral next week, the traditional advanced parole application is not going to be fast enough. We have had some success with being able to do that on the spot for an emergency application, and we can discuss that too at the USCIS office here. But yes, that's another good thing just to add is for humanitarian reasons, which we were kind of touching on. But if you have family members that are ill, that are elderly, that you haven't seen in a very long time, that you want to go grieve with, things like that, we have had those applications approved too. A lot of our DACA clients very close to their grandparents, haven't been able to see them in a very long time. Now grandparents are older, have health problems. Those are the types of things we can try to apply if you have proof of those medical conditions.
Yeah, and you could do emergency type processing where
that's true.
You can contact immigration and say, look, I have a medical emergency. I have DACA. I need to leave. Now, normally they would want you to they would want proof that you filed your advanced parole already, and then they'll schedule you an interview with your local field office. But what we've been saying recently, sort of a trend, is that they're telling our clients that after they contact USCIS, that just take your forms with you and go to the field office, and they have to schedule an appointment, and sometimes it's 1 week or 2 weeks out. But the good thing is that they're at least allowing you to file it on an emergency basis.
Yes.
The advantages of the travel permit, well, one is, and we get this is a very common question that we get. We have DACA clients who are married to U.S. citizens, and they want to see if there's any pathway to become a resident through their relationship. And I would say a good 60 to 70%, at least our clients that we've seen, may not have, didn't enter with a visa. They didn't enter with any type of permission when they were young. They crossed without inspection. And that is one of the main requirements to apply for a green card here through a family. You have to show that you had entered with a visa or some other permit, or that you were inspected. In general, that's what you need to show. There are clearly some exceptions. And so that's why individuals who have DACA might not be able, even though they have DACA, might not be able to apply here in the United States through that process. Is called adjustment of status, and instead they have to go outside the country. And so one strategy that we've seen in the past work for us is that if there is a humanitarian reason or medical reason, and if they do travel with advanced parole and return, then they would have satisfied that requirement that you need to show that you had entered with some sort of permission, visa. Here you enter with your advanced parole, you were admitted and inspected, and that could make you eligible to apply for adjustment status. But again, if you have this scenario, speak with your lawyer. Things change, policies change, DACA could change. And so it's very important to get the most up-to-date information.
That's right.
Speaking of everything is changing, what's next? What are the lawmakers are doing? Can you have an answer for our people, both of you, Jennifer and Nick?
Well, there's two fronts right now that we're looking at. There's the litigation, which you see in federal court, and we know that that DACA has been like a roller coaster ride since its creation, and it's a very controversial program, and it's heavily litigated by the states and other people who don't want DACA. And so you see DACA since its inception, you've seen it suspended several times. And could that happen? Possibly. That could happen. We're monitoring a case, specifically a case out of the Southern District of here in Texas, the federal district court. And the judge here is waiting to see what is going to happen with legislation. He has a case right now where he could very much issue a ruling to try to suspend DACA in one way or the other. And so right now we're waiting to see what happens there. But more importantly, the second front here is what happens with legislation. So you have litigation, and then you have legislation. This is what you hear on the news when you hear about the American Dream and Promise Act, and when you hear about proposals and bills. And this, we are seeing some movement, and we're monitoring that very carefully. We are seeing bills that in both the House and the Senate, and the American Dream and Promise Act several weeks ago was passed through the House of Representatives. So it's a slow-moving thing. It's very political, and we're waiting to see what happens there. So we're keeping an eye on that. And so, yeah, that's where we're left. We have this possibility of DACA. We have public support for DACA, and then we have legislation right now. And we hope that this year, God willing, we can see some changes that would give the opportunity for individuals who have DACA, and also individuals who are ineligible for DACA because of age or other reason, to give them an opportunity to apply for residence under these proposals, under these bills. They propose to give some sort of, residence, permanent residence, different tracks, but one fast track for those who have DACA and another track for those who don't have DACA. And the requirements are somewhat similar, but they're different. They're a little bit broader, which may be good, especially for those individuals who came right when they were 16 or 17 and are ineligible for DACA, but could be eligible for under new legislation. So we'll wait and see on that.
Perfect, thank you. Jennifer, what do you think about this? I mean, I would like to hear you about this, just in a few words.
Yes, I think there is a lot of public support for DACA. It is very controversial, as Nick was mentioning, but I think that's a positive. I think we've definitely seen some positive signals from the new administration. So we are continuing to monitor that. We try to keep everyone informed through mediums like this, our Facebook page, our app. So those are good ways to stay in the loop. And then we just want people to be as prepared as possible, right? So if you have a border apprehension that you don't know what happened, if you don't have your criminal documents for something, it's a good time to try to get all those records so that in case we do have a change, you are prepared. And then also just keep saving everything, right? If you have new taxes, anything like that, just save everything in case we need those documents if we do have reform.
Good, perfect. Time is gone, but we appreciate your listening to us. And remember, Chavez and Balco can help you in this DACA situation, in anything that immigration problem you have. So
we did
talk with us.
I'm sorry. We did get a question in, and I want to see if Jennifer, maybe you could take that.
Yes. So how long is the process taking right now for an initial application? Once your application is filed, it could be about up to 9 months approximately. That is published on uscis.gov, and you can type in processing times, and then you can see those processing times. So that's about how long it's taking right now. Renewal about 1.5 months to about 3.5 months. And that could fluctuate with the pandemic.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Perfect. But Christian Durantes is telling us how long is this process? But your answer to that question.
Yes,
sorry.
that was a good question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Now, time is over. Muchas gracias por escucharnos a todos nuestros amigos. Les recordamos que Chavez y Balco, su llave para inmigración, le puede ayudar, le puede apoyar. Nada más búsquenos para hacer una cita, 214-251-8011 y 817-332-1100. Apreciamos mucho su compañía, les agradecemos. Como siempre, cada 8 días estamos con ustedes. Nick, ¿quiere usted dar una despedida?
Bueno, ¡viva México!
¡Viva México!
¡Viva México!, ¿verdad?
Y viva el 5 de mayo.
¿Dónde están mis tragos?
Allá a la derecha, a su derecha. Yo vi una botella bonita que estaba por allá en la derecha.
Por el norte de México.
No, es cubana. Bueno, de origen cubano. Pero sí sirve, sí sirve. Les agradecemos mucho a todos nuestros amigos y los esperamos la semana que entra. Muchísimas gracias por su presencia, por su colaboración y gracias a nuestros abogados Nick y Jennifer. Thank you
so much. Bye-bye.